Good evening and hello, everyone. Welcome to Roll to Heal Table Talk. I am one of your hosts, Mike, and I am joined with Corey and Max. Hello, Corey. Hello,
Hey
Max.
everybody, you guys warming up yet? We're still freezing.
Nope, it was in the 20s today.
I think the high for the best for the week was like 18. It's
Yep.
terrible.
Yeah, supposedly it's going to get in the 50s tomorrow and then stay that way for a couple days and then drop again. So
Trade
it's
you.
nice. Yeah, I bet. It's a nice little roller coaster in Texas. Well, tonight we're gonna be covering another topic, and this topic is defeating dragons and demons: consumers' perspectives on mental health recovery and role-playing games. This particular study was done by Francesco Cozzo and Ellie Quinlan. I hope I say that right every time. Um, and one thing I want to point out is that this article was accepted back in December 21st of 2020. Um, what are your what are y'all's initial thoughts on this article when you read it?
Go for it, Max.
It was good. One of the things that I was kind of excited to get more information on was the when they talked about this whole psychological recovery model. We'd seen it mentioned before, but we actually didn't get the individual components of it for people that aren't involved in being a licensed therapist or psychologist. It's good to get that little tidbit of information.
Yeah, I was seeing that same thing when I was reading it. And they cover two specific models for recovery. One of them, well, we'll get into it. I'm not gonna delve too deep. We'll get into it for sure. But what's interesting enough is that we have a guest who's going to be joining us in the coming weeks, and I'm still ironing out the date. But what he wants to talk about is something very similar to those recovery models. So that'll be a
Okay, nice.
that'll be an interesting conversation to have. Corey, what are your initial thoughts?
I like how the authors dove into this and actually gave us tangible feedback from the people that were interviewed, from the people that were involved.
Yeah, like
I like the quotes. I like that they actually broke it down.
Yep. Yeah, the participants gave their insight, what they were going through, and what their thought process was. Um, yeah, we'll definitely touch on a couple of those. So for this article, their objective was to use role playing games as illicit narratives of heroism, mastery, and agency. These factors considered to promote mental health recovery. The study investigates what themes emerge from the stories of role playing game players in recovery from mental health difficulties and how their stories reflect existing models of mental health recovery. Um, so their method, I'm not going to read this verbatim, but essentially their method was to use 13 players to basically run, like, play in their game, get do interviews, and have them talk about their experiences with the game and their recovery process. They did use analysis of narratives to conduct inductively and deductively, which I thought was a pretty interesting way to approach it. Yeah. So a couple of key points that they talked about, which were already known, and we've covered these in our last conversation. Mental health difficulties can severely impact a person's quality of life and disrupt their internal narrative. Mental health difficulties can severely impact a person's quality of life and just, oh, they repeated it. Community based
Yeah.
activities can foster a sense of growth, self mastery, and agency that may ultimately lead to identity reconstruction and a sense of personal recovery. And role playing games have been identified as potentially helpful in assisting people with mental health difficulties restore a sense of agency and positive identity. So, with that,
I mean, I think we're going to hear that breakdown a lot in a lot of these.
absolutely. Just in some of the other ones that I've been like researching and reading about, there's definitely a lot of crossover. Um, the interesting thing with this article that I liked was it gave us a breakdown of all the players who are
Yes.
involved, and it shows a pretty widespread um, experience level amongst all of them. Like I think the youngest was like half a year, and the
Yeah.
oldest was something I think it was 39 years. So there's a huge spread in experience when it comes to playing this game. All right, so I promise I'm not going to read every single little article. I don't want to put everyone to sleep, but as we talked about in the intro, the psychological recovery model. Now, this is it's a four key process for finding hope, reestablishment of identity, finding meaning in life, and taking responsibility for recovery. They, with this in mind, they additionally move through the 5 stages of recovery, which is moratorium, awareness, preparation, rebuilding, and growth. Um, so moratorium for this is the first time I ever heard this word, so I was scratching my head when I heard it. It essentially is a lack of hope and meaning. So those feelings of dread that people have.
Yeah, it wasn't as bad as I initially thought it was. I had to do the same thing, go look up what they meant by it. And I was like, oh, okay. Whew.
I mean, they do a good job of explaining these and where their thought process is with each of them.
They
So
do.
I think that's a pretty good idea. Uh, Simura says that is why it is good about a lot of tabletop role playing games. You can have a lot of different experience levels play at the same table. Absolutely. I mean, we talked a little bit about that last week, like when you bring in a new player who's never played before.
It's
Like
almost
watching.
encouraged.
Absolutely, yeah, I think it is. Like you see everyone else getting into it, and it's infectious. Um, so moving on to awareness, the awareness level of the 5 stages of recovery. That's where they start to see a glimmer of hope with their recovery and see that it's possible. And then you move on to preparation. This is where they start looking for resources available to them that can help them improve. And then you move on to the rebuilding phase, which is where they start developing personal goals and have and experience a sense of achievement and a newfound strength. And then the growth stage, this one I thought was interesting because what it is it's a reestablishment of a positive sense of self and characterized by self-worth and agency. Um, because it doesn't necessarily mean that your journey is over. It just means that you're starting to show those signs of improvement into overcoming whatever your challenge is. So it's like basically taking you to the next step in your journey with your recovery. It's not saying like it's never saying that it will ever be over. It just you're moving on to dealing with it all the time. So I really like that about the recovery model. I think it shows.
Yeah, I've never seen one laid out in that fashion.
Hmm.
Not that I'm no expert in the field by any stretch, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, like most of my experience is not even in like um health or recovery or anything like that. It's just I've always seen it from like a team building um aspect, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. Because like you go through the different stages of team building, which you have the storming, the performing, the norming, and then the disestablished, like this dissolve stage. So it's always like a task gets accomplished and you complete the task and you complete it and you are efficient and you go through and you're doing all these things, and then once the job is done the team dissolves and everyone goes on to their next project. And this struck me in a way that made me like see it in a different perspective of it's never going to stop but you're never alone. Psych Ward says the way he interpreted moratorium is the sense of stuck in the in the look of lack of hope by being suspended in an activity. Yeah, I mean
Yes.
loop. Yes,
Loop.
thank you. Yeah, definitely. I can definitely see that being the case because you get inside your own head and you think about the same thing and you feed onto it, and it just keeps going and going and going. And that's kind of where they were talking about at the top. I'm gonna scroll back up to it real quick. The disruptive nature. So, I lost it, but it talks about disrupting the cycle, and that it breaks up the moratorium. Anyway,
I thought that was a little later.
it
What?
might have been. I've read this a couple of times, so it all kind of like starts to meld
Yes, it
together.
does.
All right, so um, people with mental health difficulties often experience a sense of lost identity. Um, I didn't like before I started like my own mental health wellness journey. I didn't really think much about like identity, and then once I started going through the process and learning about myself and reading all these articles, this particular line stuck out to me a lot. Like you just think about how any challenge that you've come across and how you don't really understand or process it, and then
No, it makes sense because, and I've mentioned it before, my garage, and I didn't think of it until I read that line either, that my garage is my lost identity. They like friends, buddies, fellow people that need help. If they can't go anywhere, they know that garage is there. And until I read that line, I didn't realize that that was mine or is mine, not even was. It's that helpful space, if that makes any sense.
yeah. um Psychboard says, I saw the loss of identity notation in this peer reviewed article, a direct correlation to the book Tribe with your loss of purpose and identity. Yes. There is a book called Tribe. Um, Psychboard, help me out. Who's the author again of that one? Uh, Sebastian Younger.
Yes.
So um, this book. covers um, the veteran perspective of leaving the service and how that loss of purpose and identity plays a huge factor in the separation from that, and how you lose that camaraderie and it and the effect it has on you. And it really paints an interesting picture. I haven't finished the book yet. I'm in the process of reading it, but what I have read so far, it's pretty amazing. Like, just the connection between even my own experiences and what's being said in the book. Thank you. All right, and with that, kind of skipped over a lot of what they're talking about in this article, because most of it is just talking about D&D and everything, but these this thought process can be utilized for any tabletop role playing game. So don't think that just because it talks about D&D, it's just strictly for that. Any tabletop role playing game that involves some sort of character development and um, interaction with other players in a environment like that, it fits the criteria of what we're talking about. So D&D is just the most popular. It's well known. Um, so don't feel like just because we're talking about D&D, it's specifically for D&D. So they go into detail about their design and their qualitative approach, um, utilizing narrative inquiry, um, and these are kind of things we've talked about in our last episode, where um, the role playing and the effect it has on how people interact, and the the opportunity it gives them to experiment. So they go into some detail about this, um, and then they talk about their recruitment process and their participants. And as I mentioned before, it was 13. This was done in Australia, by the way, and there were the 13 residents in Australia, two females and 11 males, and the age range between them was 22 and 55. Um, it, yeah,
That's about right.
yep,
I think here in the US, the reason why that the top number will be longer is just it has a deeper rooted, it's got its longevity here.
absolutely. That's trying to say hi. Um, and then what I thought was kind of interesting to see them do is that they talk about their interview procedure. Um, the one thing I saw when I read this section that didn't I didn't see is they talk about their interview and their length of interview, and how many, and they say that some that they were done in face to face and then on Zoom. I would have liked to have seen how many of them were face to face and how many of them were through Zoom, and see if there was any correlation between what people shared face to face versus what people shared during the Zoom calls. Because when you're in person, it definitely is different than when you're over a video call, because they're
Oh yeah.
not right in front of you. So there is a level of disconnect when it's over a conference call. So I would have liked to have seen that. But other than that, um, they asked three open-ended questions, which were, tell me about how you started playing Dungeons and Dragons and your experiences with it. Tell me how you created your Dungeons and Dragons characters and your experiences playing those character, and tell me about the role Dungeons and Dragons either played or did not play in your mental health recovery. So an interesting thing that I thought we could do is answer those questions, like as like all three of us.
Absolutely.
So with that, I'll go first. Um, Tell me about how you started playing Dungeons and Dragons and your experience with it. My first experience with tabletop role playing games was actually not Dungeons and Dragons. It was Vampire the Masquerade, the revised edition. That was how I got introduced to role playing games. I was 19 at the time, going to like community college, and my friends were like, "Hey, we're playing Vampire the Masquerade. You know, you interested?" And I was like, "Well, I never tried it. Sure, why not? I'm game. You know, college years experimentation, right?" So, um, and my experiences with it were, um, it was alien to me is the best way I can put it. Um, I didn't quite know what I was doing, because how vampire works is there are 13 clans and you have to choose one, and they all have different demeanors and how they act, and I didn't really know anything about the game, so I was reading through all of them and I was like, I really I'm reading all of them, and I don't like a lot of them, because a lot of them, like, you have like businessmen and
Yep.
artists and brute forces, and then I came to the Malkavian, and
I laugh because that was mine too.
yeah. So anyone who doesn't know, Malkavians are essentially the crazy vampires, but they have this interesting thing, called the mind web, and they're all connected to each other. And that part of the Malkavian is what fascinated me. So the person who was running it, I talked with him about it, and I told him how interested I was in the mind web, and he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna have so much fun with you." And I didn't realize at the time that that's what was going on, like what was gonna happen. But then, I figured it out, and I enjoyed what he was doing with it, taking out like art pictures and messing with them, and he was saying, "You see this image in your head," and then, he'd like give me songs, and he'd have them playing and say, "What do you think that this means to you?" And I'm like, "I don't know, but I'm gonna figure it out." And I'd get obsessed with trying to figure out what he was trying to tell me. Um, So yeah, that was my first experience with role playing games. Tell me about how you created your D&D character and your experiences playing this character. So with this one, I will use my most recent character, um, his name is John Jonah James, but everyone calls him Dunn, Dunn. He is a rogue cook, and he's not like your sneaky, I'm gonna lurk in the shadows and, um, kind of steal everything. He's more of a information guy. He connects to people, feeds them, maybe slips a little something in their food, who knows. But, um, my experiences playing him, with I kind of based myself off of this character, not so much the slipping things in people's food or stealing, but the cooking, because that's what I do, um, or that's what I did in the Coast Guard. So I was a cook, and I was like, I think it'd be fun to, you know, play something that resembles myself in some instance. So I've been having fun with it, and Under Siege Coasty Edition. Yes, thank you, Simaru. uh, Appreciate that. But one of the interesting things with it that I'm having fun with is, because the setting is the Underdark. I'm having to experiment with mushrooms and like foods and other things to, try to make edible meals. And, I know yeah, I'm not the one doing that. That's a different player. going on, spirit journeys with teas and whatnot. Uh, um, Ligus Prodigo, thank you so much for the follow. Um, but yeah, to that point, but I'll find like spices and things like that. And then yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, I haven't gotten to delve too deep into like the details of cooking the food, mostly because most of what we're eating is just like raw mushrooms and like mushroom stumps that we're finding because we're in the dark lake right now, and like I could cook, but everyone's like, I don't think you should because you might set the boat on fire. I was like, it'll be fine. Yeah, yeah, that's true. So Psych Ward is our DM, for those who don't know, and he goes, "It's been fun. Never know how many of those magic mushrooms will have a relapse." Yep. MREs of TTRPGs. Yep. Right. Um, and then the last question that I'll answer. Tell me about the role Dungeons and Dragons either played or did not play in your mental health recovery. Um, so this one is, I've talked about this before. Um, for me, this is pretty like with uh, playing with the group within Roll to Heal, even in this past year, is what has set me on my path to my own mental health recovery. Because I I dealt with a lot of things, and I would get angry all the time, and I would shut myself out, and like I don't like sitting with my back to the door in public spaces. But when I'm with the table and I'm playing the game, I don't have those little triggers that set me off or put me on edge. And talking to some people, they notice these little things before I even started talking to a therapist, and uh, they kind of pointed those things out to me, and not like diagnosing me, but saying, "Hey, man, we noticed like you're dealing with X, Y, and Z. Are you talking to anybody, or seeking any help?" And I said, "No, I don't think there's anything wrong with me. I was in that self doubt mode, and going through all of the stages of battling with myself on if I was going to seek help or not." And then one of the guys that I talked to, he was like, "Talk to your wife about it." So, I was like, "All right." So I talked to my wife about it and asked her if she think it'd be a good idea that I go talk to somebody, and she said yes. So, I'm going to listen to my wife and go talk to somebody about it. So that's kind of how it played a part in my mental health recovery. But yeah, uh, Corin Horn said, "Too bad it's not the Mario universe and the mushrooms would be primo." Yeah, that's. I would love to be doubling in size when I eat a mushroom. All right, Corey, you're on the chopping block, my friend.
Wow, a guy signs one homework assignment.
Yeah, but you got to do
um,
yours live.
yeah, I know, right? Tell me about how you started playing Dungeons and Dragons and your experiences with it. Well, mine was the same with you. I was a senior in high school, and it was Vampire the Masquerade. And I remember reading through that manual, not the manual, just the section of the 13 of them. I don't know. I read through it a bunch of times, and I finally picked up on the same one you did, just because it was the most twisted group of individuals that was in there, and I wasn't in the best headspace. So let's have fun. At least that's where my mind went with it. Um, we only got maybe 3 or 4 sessions in, and there was me and another guy that were still learning the system because we'd never had any experience with any of it at all. So, unfortunately, by that point is when I decided to raise my hand and go stand on some yellow footprints. So, I honestly don't know how they fared out. I never got up with any of them after I got out. How I created my Dungeons and Dragons character and my experience playing the character. So that experience was just horrible, and it was long. It wasn't normal. But with that, when I was in the Marine Corps, I was in one of my schools, and there was a bunch of guys that were playing Star Wars, and I was like, "Oh, all right, yeah, I can join in." And the one kid's like, "You sure you know how to do this? You don't strike me as the type you go out a lot when you're not supposed to." I was like, "Yeah, this is going to keep me here from doing dumb shit stuff. Sorry, dumb stuff." And so with that, I basically made my version of Han Solo. It was just a rowdy, obnoxious, I'm going to do it my way kind of guy. And that is definitely where my headspace was at that time. Now that I knew what I was doing and playing and all that, it was fun. But I will say the most fun I've ever had playing a character is I was there's a group online we were playing with. Some guys would show up, some guys wouldn't. And I finally asked the DM, I said, "Can I just shoot the dice and make a character?" And the guy's name was Humph, to put it plainly. He's just a dumb warrior that part of his backstory, he got knocked out and lost all track of memory. Part of his stuff is he wants to go learn where he came from. And pardon me, that's just a fun letting the dice take control for once. That was neat. How has Dungeons and Dragons either played a part or not played a part in my mental health recovery? So I'm still in a particular place where I am not a very trustworthy individual of counselors and the such. The counselor I was seeing in high school when I wasn't in a good place ended up taking the permanent nap herself. The counselor my ex-wife and I went to go see fell asleep every time I would speak. I genuinely haven't gone and sought anything in that general direction. My son had asked to go see one, and after 2 or 3 sessions with him, my wife was all in on it, and my son's like, "Dad, I'm not going to go talk to this person. I'm going to go walk in the front door and sit in a chair, and I'll walk out the door an hour later if mom takes me in." So I know a lot of that is you need to click. I know that's a humongous portion of that is that trust has to be established quickly and right off the bat. I haven't. One of the things with getting into role playing again is getting into the camaraderie, like you had said earlier, Mike. You don't mind putting your back to a door at that table. You know all those guys. You guys and gals. I I want to find a group like that again. I haven't had one of those in a long time. So I guess does that answer those questions?
Yeah, I think you answered those questions. Max?
So I started playing TTRPGs with a bunch of old heads, guys that had been playing D&D since it came out in like first edition in the Wisconsin area, I think is where it was at. And I picked up playing second edition with my dad and his group. It was just kind of a thing that they had been doing for a while. And I kind of, being the little kid in the house that has, the session being hosted, you're like, oh, what's all this? This looks kind of cool. So after kind of watching for a while and sitting and being patient, they gave me the opportunity to join them, and that pretty much kicked off my love for pretty much anything fantasy and sci-fi from that point on. It's been one of the few experiences in my life that I would not trade for anything, because it's let me do and experience things outside of what would be normal for me. So for question 2, the last character that I played was a gnome wizard that had this, it was almost like Alzheimer's. He had this like amnesia, Alzheimer's kind of effect that would come and go as I played him. So it let me kind of get into trouble, which was fun, and create moments in the session for players to be like, hey, where'd he go? And kind of like with you guys being in the Underdark and using like mushrooms and stuff and cooking, there was a tea that I was drinking that would help me kind of keep my clarity of mind. And sometimes I would take it and sometimes I would forget it. Might have been on purpose sometimes, might have not been. And the group that I played it with was actually one of my last groups. We kind of did this flip-flop where I would DM one weekend and then my dad would DM the other weekend. So we would alternate throughout the month. And that group we'd been playing for like 10 something years. So we had the opportunity to get really creative and almost kind of impose things that your character did on other characters and let them react. And everybody played off each other really well. It was awesome. And then for 3, so tell me about the role TTRPGs either played or did not play in your mental health recovery. So some people within our Discord community know that I run a homebrew setting that's been going on essentially since the late 70s in one form or another. Like my dad started it with his group when he was in the Navy, and whenever they were out on a deployment and they had nothing to do, they would sit around the table and run their sessions. And then he left. He got out of the Navy. I joined the military. Being on like deployment, we've all had those moments where, you know, you get stressed out and you kind of just don't want to think about what's going on. So that gave me something that I could, escapism, right? Like they talk about it in the article. It gave me this barrier that I could just shut everything off, retreat to a place that I felt where I wasn't stressed, I wasn't exhausted. You know, I had something to go or somewhere to go that kept me interested, even when things were just terrible. When I got back home from my deployment, like I was engaged, ready to come back home, get married. We got back in country and found out, wasn't even 24 hours, and basically got a Dear Johnny or a Dear John. She showed up in our barracks. She was in our unit. So she showed up in our barracks and basically handed me the ring back and basically said, hey, I can't do this. I'm seeing somebody else. And it destroyed me. I was a very not good person to be around for a while, and eventually got back into working on kind of my side of our homebrew setting after that. And it was another one of those things where stuff was just really dark. I was in a very bad, deep hole. And this is one of the things that let me kind of push everything else away, let me isolate it myself from a lot of outside stressors. And it gave me a coping method, you know, that I could just continue showing up every day. Like, yeah, stuff sucked, but go through, do the routine. You go back home and you kind of like, okay, cool, I can just focus on this. And it was just that one of the things that just kept me going for that next day. Yeah, it's definitely helped me a lot. Like I said, I think the escapism, and then also kind of one of the other things they talk about in the article is like trying to find your sense of like self identity again. It helped me do a lot of that as well.
Yeah, your agency.
Yeah.
You know, I know it's not easy talking about these things. Even I I struggle with it sometimes, and I just kind of have to like, muster up the courage because we're doing this podcast, and I need to be open about my journey and things that we're going through. So appreciate you sharing. I'm pretty sure it's not easy even talking about it now. It can still set off some level of animosity. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anything else you guys want to touch on these 3 questions? What'd you think about answering them?
Makes you look into your guts and see what's going on. It truly does, because I don't even think I've told my wife about like the counselor stuff. You two in the free world that's listening are the first ones that have heard that in years.
You're probably going to get an earful about that later then. Especially because your daughter watches this, doesn't she?
Oh, she'll hear about it in a couple days when she finally pulls it up. Yeah.
Yeah. So
what do you mean, counselors, Dad?
Guess what Dad said?
That's all right, though. It's part of the growing experience we call life.
Right? Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the harder one was, kind of looking back at 3 and trying to be as absolutely honest about it as you can be. And because we all get to the points where, you still like, even though you're out of that hole, you're out of the depression and all that, you kind of get into like a bit of denial and you're like, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad. But then you have to go back and like reflect on it. You're think about it and you're like, actually, it was pretty terrible.
And then there's a lot of comparison that goes on, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you think about your own personal things, and then you see what else someone else is going through, and you go, why am I complaining? They've obviously got it a lot worse than me, and like it's that that self degradation of your own issues that is one of those hurdles that can come up when you're going through this process and moving through your own personal recovery. That goes all the way back to your more I screw this word up every time, the mortrium. What's the word?
I got to see it.
I know. It's going to drive me nuts.
I was hoping you were going to get it.
And then the document decided to go all the way to the bottom.
Was it the moratorium?
Yes. Moratorium, yes. Thank you, Max. Yeah. Simiru says DMing has/is helping to reestablish confidence in finding my voice. Yeah, that's awesome. Corinhor from last week sounds like Corey and I have that imposter syndrome and self-degradation in common. Control F is your friend, Mike. Thank you. Yeah.
No, I agree with Corin. It's going to be there a hot minute. I haven't shaken it for, I won't say how many decades.
Yeah. No, I feel it myself sometimes.
I mean, it'll be almost 20 years since we got back from our deployment. I mean, and I still think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll find its way back in your mind, no matter what you try to do. So it's just now you have a healthy out to deal with it.
My wife does know about that one, and when I get there, she's like, "Hey, you know what? You're here now. Most of them are home now. Most of them are okay. go call one of them and check on them. I don't know what the physical cues are, but she knows.
She knows
That's
you
what
better
happens
than
when
you
you've
do.
been with someone for 17 years. They just know.
Yeah, yeah, they do.
Yes, they do. Okay. Yeah, for me, I resonate pretty well with what you guys have already said. Like a lot of that self reflection. You think about it and you're just like, you play those moments in your head, go back over them, and it gets you thinking. You know, I do have a I do have one question for Corey. What was your Malkavian's name?
Oh God, I don't even remember. I honestly, I was in so to put it plainly, I was the quintessential. If I didn't join the Marine Corps, I'd have been dead or in jail. If there were bad decisions to be made, that was the part of my life I was making them. So the fact that I remember I played a Malkavian is impressive enough for me. I apologize for that, but
So, Titan AE was released about the time that I was playing this. So I named my Malkavian Bob because you can name a planet Bob, you can name a Malkavian Bob. uh, Corinhorn says it's helpful to call people when things are getting rough. I'm glad I have done so and called Psych Ward in the past. He's been helpful in listening. Yeah, like sometimes that's all it takes is just to call somebody that will, give you the time to, listen to what you have to say. All right, let us move on. So we'll talk about this table here quickly. I want to talk about the analysis section that they did. So they used the paradigmatic cognition, which is a form of analysis of narratives. Um, this enables general knowledge about a collection of stories to be gained with a focus on common attributes. The reason they chose this, and I didn't highlight this, but they chose this because of its flexible approach. And this is part of the inductive process. This, like when they were talking earlier, where they were talking about the inductive process and the deductive process. So this allows for inductive processes whilst also enabling research to explore narratives deductively. So it's a a two prong analysis for what they were gauging. So, and they even talk about their analysis in two stages. So, um, when I was reading about this, and I'll be honest, I've read this paragraph probably a dozen times, and I still have a bit of a difficulty grasping how both of the inductive and the deductive side work together within this own type of analysis. Um, I, I struggled with this section. I'm not gonna lie.
you're not the only one.
No.
Yeah, this is kind of one of those things that if we ever have someone who is in the profession on, I would love for them to explain this in a little bit more simplistic terms,
Please.
because I definitely struggled with this spot, and maybe Psych Ward can chime in. Maybe he's was able to get a better perception on it than we were able to. All right, he says so. Psych Ward
Yeah.
says the easiest way to explain inductive is bottom up view, and deductive is top down view. Okay, so that's kind of like the struggle. So the person, so say the person that they're interviewing, right, is talking about their experience during the game. The So would the inductive view be from their perspective, and then the deductive view would be from the observer's perspective? Is that how you would describe it?
That makes sense. A little more sense, not a lot, but more.
Interesting. Yeah.
And then they use the two viewpoints to cross examine the information and find the similarities. Would that be the best way to think about it? That's what I'm saying. Like this section was a little hard for me to grasp, because they do use these I wouldn't say these words, but like the wording of how they explain it. It made it a little difficult for me. So okay, so yeah, that does help. I appreciate that, Sideboard. So yeah, so the bottom up is the person who's going through the analysis, and then the deductive would be the person who's observing the analysis. Okay, that makes make a little bit more sense. Okay, so here is the table of participants that went through this study. I'm not going to go into like vast detail, but what they do list here is their first name, what race they played in D&D, what class they played in D&D, how many years of gaming they have with D&D, their self-reported diagnosis, and how many years they've been in recovery for mental health. Um, and as mentioned before, you got someone who's been doing this for 39 years, and then you have someone who's actually doing it for 3 months. That's the lowest person, 0.25 years, 3 months. So they have a good stretch of experience here, which I thought was um, pretty fascinating to see. Um, you can kind of tell with some of them how old they are. Like, the date range was 22 to 55. So obviously the 55-year-old's probably the one that's got the 39 years. But it would have been nice if they put their age next to their name, so we would know, how old they are. Because who knows? Maybe the 39-year-old started playing D&D when they were 10. We don't know,
That'd be me.
right? But yeah, so interesting. Like they do have quite a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder within the self-reported diagnosis, which is a common factor for veterans, first responders, and healthcare workers, um, among others, obviously. But
Yeah.
that's definitely one we focus on the most. And then you got others like anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, de- insomnia, addiction. So, the funny thing I've always heard about addiction is that you never really get rid of addiction; you just replace it with something else. So,
I was a 2.5 pack a day guy for a long time, and I still can't get rid of these damn things.
right? But it's
And
like
I don't
people
think the
stop.
world wants me to.
But it's like people will stop smoking, and then they either pick up, like you said, they start dipping, or some people just start going to the gym, and even that can be considered an addiction at that point, because if you're going like every day for 4 hours a day, people will look at me like, yeah, that's cool you're doing that, man, but like it can have some repercussions down the road. So but yeah, it's just interesting to see like the stretch. The in the one thing I saw in here that caught my eye is the person who's only been doing it for 0.25 years, so 3 months, has been in mental health recovery for 7 years. So that was kind of interesting to see that someone who just started has been already seeking um, help with their own mental health recovery.
Well, later in the article, and I think our overarching perspective points to that. And later in the article, there's a quote that I had picked that I want to bring up, and I think it helps explain that about how the tabletop games they're not being used to the capacity that they could be.
Mm-hmm.
And,
I mean,
was that just in that particular person's instance? Was it just not, you know what I mean? Was it not put in front of them as a tool to utilize?
Well, I mean, and we kind of mentioned this when we did our discussion last week too, is that this focus as far as a field of study and practice is still very much like in its infancy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely getting traction now, and it will definitely pick up, in the next couple of years as more and more people start talking about it. And sorry, I'm, I'd almost be willing to see about volunteering to do a couple of these studies and be part of them, just to see what they do, like maybe even experience what they're going through, like what their process is, and you know be on that side of the table as well, like as an observer, maybe, where you can see what they're doing behind the scenes, and then what you're doing on the stage, like have two different aspects that you could be a part of. So it'd be an interesting perspective. Okay, anything you guys want to talk about with the table before we move on?
No, I think it was like you said, an interesting look into kind of people's journey along recovery and seeing how either early or how late in the game they were, as far as like, oh yeah, I play tabletop games and I've noticed that there's, I get some sort of positive impact from it.
Yeah. So Psych Ward is giving us a little description on deductive and inductive reasoning. So deductive reasoning is psychological research that starts with an existing theory or hypothesis and tests it by collecting specific data to confirm or refute predictions, a top-down approach, like using attachment theory to predict adult relationship outcomes. Inductive reasoning is a psychological research begins with specific observations or data patterns and builds upward to develop new theories or generalizations. A bottom up approach, like identifying themes from interviews to propose a new model of pandemic related anxiety. Little equals small book. What did I miss?
Oh, when he's giving you a little bit of information.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
That is a little bit.
Yeah, it's relatively small for him. Let's be honest.
Don't poke the bear. Leave it be.
So, the second table they talk about presents a list of inductive and deductive themes, like we just mentioned, like Psych Ward just provided descriptions for, and they're derived from the participants in this study. So, inductive themes, such as finding space, mental health difficulties, safely engaging with mental health difficulties, skill building, experience through characters, and building relationships, whereas deductive themes, moratorium, awareness, preparation, rebuilding, and growth. So it lists the number of participants and the percentage of the participants from the whole. So for the induct, like when I saw this table, the inductive themes were a lot higher than the deductive themes. And I think that after reading those descriptions that PsychWard shared with us in the chat, that makes a lot more sense. Like this table makes a lot more sense because the inductive is the observations and the data patterns that build up to developing new theories. So that makes more sense why these numbers now are the way that they are. And then the same thing with the deductive side. That's based off of hypothesis and existing theories. So those are going to be lower because they're using those particular people in that fashion in the deductive side. So when I first saw this, I was like, it just kind of went along, coincided with the, the previous conversation with inductive and deductive and the pragmatic, or not pragmatics, apologies, paradigmatic cognition. So, yeah, the descriptions that PsychWord gave definitely helped shine a light on it a little better. So I appreciate that. Great. You guys have anything you would like to add?
No.
Okay.
No, yeah, I agree with you that this section of the article is a little harder to digest. Even getting the better explanations, it's it's something I'd have to sit down and really think on for a couple days.
Absolutely. So then they get into the results of this analysis, and they talk about the different analysis. So they got the inductive analysis, and they interviewed all the participants, and they made quotes on them. And we don't have to read all these quotes. I just kind of like notched them to say, okay, this is where somebody was actually quoted. Based on that. But this one, the second quote, really caught my attention because, as you mentioned, Max, like escapism is a big part of role playing games, and his quote specifically says, "When I'm playing D&D, I don't have to worry about all the stresses of life. They don't affect me. I really just get into character, get into the game, get into the campaign or the one shot or whatever we're playing." So, like, really delving into the game and being invested in what's going on.
Yeah, that really resonated with me. And when I went through and read that at the dealership today when I was getting my car fixed, like I had to stop for like 10, 15 minutes and really, really think the amount of time or times that I had used basically that tool or that mechanism to just, like you said, get away, to get to a place where you could recharge yourself without being stuck in that moratorium phase, or rumination phase is another one where you just get in your headspace and you just circle and circle.
Yeah. Corey, you got anything?
Not on that particular one. Yes, nothing that you guys haven't already said.
Okay. PsychWord is saying it'll be interesting to see how much more all three of us absorb out of these studies after reading 10 plus and further. Yeah.
I bet we're going to be proficient.
Well, I mean, we're already seeing a lot of crossover. There's a lot of things that, they all intertwine. But yeah, I mean, it'll definitely be interesting to see more and more as we progress in our reading and expansion on this particular subject as a whole. All right. this one, this next quote that said, I'm going to read this part because I think that this is, it falls under the escapism too. It says, it is important to note that players did not suggest the game was a complete escape from symptoms and problems, but rather a break from rumination and overthinking. Luke clarified this point by saying, D&D has provided quite an opportunity for me to keep myself grounded. Yeah. Because like that's that fine line you have to walk with when it comes to escapism, because at some point you might start delving into obsessiveness, you know.
Well, and they mentioned that as a potential negative outcome
Yes.
of doing this kind of stuff later on.
Yes, they do.
And I mean, it can be, like you said, it can very much be a form of addiction.
Yeah. Psych word says
Bleed.
something
Yep.
I find from DMing is it allows me to step into a different set of shoes or roll for a few hours. Yep. And then
Well,
the bleed effect.
there's good bleed and bad bleed too.
Okay,
Yeah.
somebody explain bleed to the new guy. Sorry.
Go ahead, Max.
So it is. Let me see if I can find where they mention it here. It's kind of like there's a bit of an overlap and an experience that you have within the game that basically, the way I understood it is there was a overlap between what your character experiences and then what you kind of resonate with. So there can be good bleed over moments where you're going through something that's a similar struggle that you had in real life, and you get some sort of closure in game, and you can feel satisfaction personally, not as the character, in getting closure as well. And there can also be kind of the reverse of with a negative experience in game as well. I know from a campaign that I ran, I got the okay ahead of time, but I basically put the group through like a scene of torture, and it carried over for a couple of weeks where people just had this really heavy feeling on them, like personally. So like we had to kind of step back and be like, hey, like we're in a safe place and it's okay to not feel good, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
So right here. It talks about bleed, and this is from the analysis. It says, in the roleplay literature, the phenomenon of bleed refers to the thoughts, feelings, and interpersonal behaviors of the player influencing the character, and vice versa. Psych word says spillover of emotions, insights, or behaviors from a player's real life and their character. Yes, very much so. Yeah. An interesting story that I read a long time ago, and anyone can find this online. It is pretty much a story of legend, and it is based off of uh, a game of Call of Cthulhu that was played. And the person who made a character, the character's name was Old Man Henderson. I won't get too crazy into the details, but basically what happened is the player was getting fed up with the GM because the player was invested in every character he ever made, and the GM would just kill him off in the dumbest ways possible, and it basically upset him. And he got to a point where he broke, and the way that the story goes is there was a week between the session that he died, his latest character died, and the next session, and he got so fed up that he thought up like the craziest thing, that like this craziest character he could, and wrote everything down in a binder with all these like little notes and like magazine cutouts and writing in different languages, really like delving into this crazy character of Old Man Henderson, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that the story, like you read the story, it's going to take you probably the better part of an hour to read through the whole story. But he's essentially the only character to ever win in Call of Cthulhu because of the crazy stuff he pulled, and a lot of it came from that bleed effect because like it even starts out where um, it's from a different player's perspective, and the player who played Old Man Henderson picked him up to go to the game, and the Old Man Henderson player goes, "I did something," and he just handed the binder to the other guy, and the other guy was reading through it, and he's like, the only
Oh
response he
no.
gave was, "What?" So there was definitely some bleed going on when that character was made, for sure. Koran horn, asymmetrical and unconventional warfare for the win. There was definitely a lot of that going on. When you read that story, if you read that story, um, yeah, it's interesting. Fair warning though, there is a lot of language throughout that entire story. I did not write it. I just read it.
Wow.
So yeah. Okay, and scroll down back to where we were. Okay, moving on. Um, so this one right here was interesting as well. Corin, I'm not a PG reader. I'm just warning people who might be.
I done read no good.
Yes, I'm a very slow reader. Like the
Oh,
the
me
tribe
too.
the tribe book I'm reading. I'm 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 reading it and reading it, and I'm sure Chris has already read it like 8 times by now, and he's probably like, "Why does it take you so long to read this book?" Because I'm a slow reader. Psych Ward, The Unhealthy Bleeds. Best example, however extreme, is the story that started with the Satanic Panic.
Mm,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, that you're not wrong there.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to this. He's like, Brian provided an illuminating example of how D&D provided the opportunity to safely engage with difficulties. Brian reported playing an incubus whose true nature was concealed. He commented that his character experiences trauma about how he has to hide such a large part of his nature, and I used that to obviously represent my own experiences being gay. It gave me an element of roleplay where I could actively re-experience what I went through. So that's that, experimentation that we talked about last time, and part that's also part of the role playing too. You know, putting yourself in those situations and experiencing it or re-experiencing it in Brian's case.
To potentially a different outcome, or could even be the same outcome too,
Absolutely.
which lets you kind of, again, reflect and reanalyze kind of your own situation, and sometimes, look at it from a different light or get a little bit more closure.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to the skill building part where 9 participants discussed how role playing helped them safely practice skills that they deemed important for their mental health recovery. And Corey, you expressed a lot of interest in this section. Um, well, one of these like part of this section too.
Yeah.
And I'll move down. So move to that particular quote. It says, for those players that have difficulties with social interactions, turning up for regular games can become a way to challenge and develop their social skills. For example, Edward said, it can be a good way of overcoming anxiety, especially about talking to groups in different situations.
Yeah, I mean, mine went on a little further, but look at all the skills. I encourage everybody to go find this paper and read, if nothing else, the skill building portion and the building of relationships and things like that. It's all of those quotes that you saw him scroll by were all how they helped build, and how the people that they interviewed just felt how it was they were bettered by what they had done. My big one that I honed in on was the building of relationships. Um,
I did as well.
it it's and I we all know it all stems from the bonds that are forged in chaos. It's Max, you and I haven't met each other, but for what, 6 weeks ago on Discord,
Right?
and you and I already have a shared bond.
Yep.
I still don't know if I got to tell you about the bad code or not, but I'm over it, and I'll get to it when we can. I know you were concerned about that for me, but
Yes.
and that's one of the things that I see this doing is it's their shared experiences outside of yours and my, like you and I have a unique situation, but we can sit down at this table and with 5 other people and start those relationships to start getting that sense of community, to start bonding everything.
Yeah.
I guess the social dynamic is what truly draws me to this.
And I mean, it even goes further than kind of what our group focuses on, with us kind of targeting veterans and first responders and healthcare workers. So again, like my last group, we had 6 players. I was DMing, so there was 7 total in the group. We played, like I said, for I think close to 12 years total. Um, like they were around from the time that my first child was the only child in existence to having been through 2 of my own children being added to the world and having to deal with, daddy duties. um, and it was like you said, it's that we get to go outside the norm. We get to experience these extraordinary situations in a setting that is high risk, high danger, high reward. But we get to do it with the safety of, okay, if something bad happens, it's not to me personally.
Yeah.
I just have to roll another character. But the cool thing about it is you have a group that falls apart because life happens, and you still do your monthly or weekly check-ins on Discord, and you learn that hey, I lost 2 of my toes because I've let my diabetes get out of control. And suddenly it's like, whoa, dude, no, time out. What are you doing?
Yep.
Like, what's going on? You need to take care of yourself. And it's that particular group. Players came from all walks of life and all over the spectrum on many facets. And we were completely and absolutely able to just discard all of that so that we could come together at the table. And like I said, I'm friends with every one of them. We still talk, even though we haven't played in probably over a year now.
Yeah, I think for me, this is something that I've struggled with throughout my entire career in the Coast Guard because I moved around so much. But like keeping those connections was always difficult. Um, and
Yes.
I know that it's usually a two-way street, but I definitely could have tried a little harder. But when we were together, that bond was there. You could feel it for sure. Um, even after like I would move away, we would still talk. And a couple of people I used to play with, that we still talk from time to time, but not as frequently as it should be. You know, per my own perspective. I'll just put that out there. I'm not basing this off of some scale or chart or anything, but it's just my own perspective. It's like I could definitely put forth a little bit more effort, but it's what it is, and it's something it's one of the challenges I'm working on. So yeah, that definitely falls into the next topic of building relationships. Um, but Psychward did say that when he first started researching and read about these skill sets that are learned, it really made him say all from some D&D play, and it took him a bit to grasp how much tabletop role playing games really have an impact. Yeah, like a lot of people feel that way. And like I know I explained, like even when I was explaining to my mom that we were starting this nonprofit, and she was like, "Huh?" at first, and then she started like seeing it in my niece and how it was helping her, and like it started making sense. Like the more we talked about it, and we started explaining these things. So yeah, that definitely is out there where people just don't fully understand it.
It
Okay.
makes you wonder too if it's they don't quite understand it because it's kind of that outsider looking in stigma. You know how like D&D and role playing games for the longest time were not popular, and the people that did it were, it was kind of like the, oh, you're a nerd, whatever they wanted to label people with, right? And it was kind of like that, I'm too cool for it, or no, that's too, whatever for me, and it's not what I'm into. And part of me wonders if that's still the case for a lot of the people, and that's why they don't look at it. Because, and kind of go a little bit off topic, like it's kind of the same thing with the whole like online gaming buddies. People, when you tell people like, oh yeah, like some of my best friends are people I've only ever met online, and they're like, how can that be your best friend?
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much the case with me. Psych Ward and Major, I've known them for over 15 years at this point, and they're the most consistent friends that I've had throughout
Yeah.
my entire, like even the last 20 years. It's like they're my best friends. Like I'm not gonna say they're not, like because we spent so much time together, and we've gotten to know each other on a personal level. Even though I only met both of them in person within the last year, like they were still my best friends even before that. So yeah, that
Man,
it's definitely a stigma, like for sure. You look like you want to say something, Max.
no, it's just like I almost feel bad for people that don't get to experience it
Yes.
because of like I know how much it's enriched and improved certain aspects of my life.
Mhm.
And it makes you wonder how much it could affect and alter other people's as well. Especially people that are, like I can think of people that I interact with directly that suffer from things like anxiety and depression and stuff like that they just kind of go through the routine or the numbers, and just it's one of those things like, okay, cool, it's 8 o'clock, time to go to work, and then clock out, go home, and like that's all they do.
Yeah.
Man,
Okay. Let's talk about building relationships. Said Participants mentioned the social aspect of the game as a fundamental aspect of recovery. This included the role of D&D in meeting social needs and providing a sense of connection. For example, Ivan was quite aware of this when he said, "I needed something to socialize." Straight and to the point.
It is. That's what I actually wrote in my notes. Was it? Boom. He wasn't even playing. It was such a quick, heartfelt answer.
Yep.
Excuse me. Pardon me.
Yep, we do. We do fight like brothers sometimes, psych ward. And then Mary basically brought up people's circumstances, and she said mental health systems were really failing us at the mental health center. It resulted in them having no activities for the 3 weeks that I was there. Then the patients went and created their own thing, and so D&D really filled that void and gave us a sense of community, and we continued that when we left. So for me, this one really brought up a thought that I see quite frequently in TV shows and movies, where whenever they are talking about people going to talk to somebody about mental health, it's always group therapy. And what is the scene that you most commonly see when they're doing these group therapies? A big dark room with everybody in a circle and nobody talking. And it just looks like nobody wants to be there, no one wants to say anything or talk. So when I read this, that was literally the first thing that popped in my head.
Yeah. And then
Yeah,
the fact that they said, no, I'm sorry, go Max.
Go. No.
And then the fact they basically said, forget this, let's figure it out.
Yep.
And they found something that worked.
Yeah. I mean, and I know a couple personal cases of kind of like what they mentioned with their mental health center basically failing to meet kind of the needs that they had. Like all of us that have served have at one point or another experienced that ourselves. For most of us, it's fairly minor, but like I can think of one guy by name who had exactly that happen and was basically living in the woods, like lost his home, was homeless, all of it because he couldn't get the help that he had needed for his PTSD. And the guy was camped out in the woods up in the New England area over winter. And it's a real crappy feeling when you sit and think about that.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's not really much else to add to that. You're pretty spot on about it. All right, and then the social and structured encounters built around the game table have the potential to develop into ongoing relationships. We kind of already mentioned how that's true. Dylan says that D&D maintains those social connections with people that you come to be friends with. We go off festivals together now. We're going to go off and see a band together, so we're doing things outside of the game as friends as well. Yeah, I mean, that just naturally happens as you build trust with the people you're playing with. You get to know everybody, and it does wonders. Okay, you guys have anything you'd like to add to that? No.
No.
On to the deductive analysis. So it breaks it down by each individual category. based off of deductive analysis in this particular study. We've kind of gone over moratorium. It's um, the sense of loss, um, kind of that never-ending cycle of going into your own self-doubt and toiling with your own challenges, self-reflection, things along that line. But Corey, you had some interesting, like you had a pretty big focus on the awareness and the preparation side. So
And I don't know if it was just to give credit to the folks doing the study, but it definitely, they sat back and looked at where the different participants were in their awareness of what's going on. I didn't expect to read that. I didn't expect to see that. I I didn't expect it. And the fact that I won't say they thoroughly honed in on it, but they definitely acknowledged, if you go up to that one of the charts earlier, it might even be I thought there was a chart that it showed the different levels of where folks thought they were at, or did I just see a chart in
you're
my head?
talking about the recovery in years.
That might have been what I correlated with the awareness and the preparation.
Yeah, I could see that.
Okay.
But it was just the fact that they call it out. Like, no, this isn't the beginning, but it's the individuals know that, okay, this is a problem. Let's get on this. And the fact that they called it out. And then in the preparation about how they at least explain a little bit about how they create the character, like the character creation part, about how they kind of mirror themselves and they use the game to face things.
Okay.
It's that like partial alias or a different alias that you use that we mentioned beforehand, where you take,
Yes.
part of yourself and throw it in there and see how it reacts.
Yeah.
So I got a question for the two of you. Did you guys read the deductive analysis and then immediately start psychoanalyzing yourself?
Oh, did I ever?
100%. I do that all the time.
Oh,
Like-
did I ever?
I think I lingered on this section a lot, and like even going back and reading each passage probably 3-4 times, and like picking apart personal experiences, and been like, I was not prepared at all. I didn't assess and place myself appropriately. I wasn't responding appropriately, and it's like you go through each section, and yeah, I did a lot of reflection on this part.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of, like, when you read these things, you definitely inject yourself in the scenario, and you end up resonating with some of the people who are doing it, and and that kind of happens when you're reading what they're saying, like actual quotes from the participants, and like you see a lot of yourself in these people, and like kind of like goes back to that whole big picture where we're all different and we all have our own challenges and differences, but at some level at our core there's something or multiple things that are the same.
Mhm.
So that level of bonding with someone is there, or at least the opportunity to bond with somebody is there. And then moving on to preparation. This is another area that Corey had a lot of fascination with.
It was the two of them. I don't know. Maybe that's where I am personally.
Maybe there's a lot of awareness and preparation going on in your personal life.
I don't know. It makes those were just out of that group, those two sprung out to me because I went through and you skim over everything, and at least like every other 12-year-old I know, I see the headers and I go through and read all the headers, and then I go back up and start reading again.
Mm-hmm.
When I got to that section and read the headers of the different paragraphs, those were the two that I actually read the paragraph right out of the gate. It's like, huh, that attracted my attention. And then when you go through and reread it all again, it's, yeah, those all make sense.
Yeah, the preparation, when I was reading this, um, the thing that I kind of saw was that even though they're all like there's multiple participants even in this little paragraph, so they're all different in their level of preparation. So it's not just a you're here and that's where you're at. They all have a different way of preparing. So it showcased, at least in my viewpoint, that there are multiple ways to get to this stage. It's not just a, you know, do this and you're going to get there. So there's definitely branches to your your journey on your own recovery. Um, and then it goes into rebuilding, and I didn't highlight it, but this one right here. These participants discuss consciously using adaptive skills in real life to maintain and foster mental well-being. So that stuck out to me, just because it's a commonality between all of them. So the branches, like I was talking previously, the branches split, but then they can also turn back and weave back into each other. So there's a lot of crossover in the past. It's not like you're going to go down one path and then it's just going to keep veering off into its own direction. There's a lot of weaving back and forth.
And there's almost like a bit of foreshadowing too in some of the testimonies and quotes that they had earlier in the article too. Because I remember one of the individuals saying that they would run into an instance where they would react to something without even thinking about it. And then they would stop themselves and be like, no, but what would my character do? Like they started taking like a fictional person that they had developed a frame of mind for, and then started using that as a measure on how they're processing things in real life, getting themselves to like slow down and be like, okay, no, that wasn't appropriate. What would this person do? I thought that was really interesting that people actually do that.
Yeah. I mean, I know I've done it. It's all that. It's part of that experimentation, you know.
Right. Well, it's always been, it's always the joking. We've always done it jokingly, right? Like, what would Chuck Norris do? You know, situations like that. It was never, I would have never have thought to, you know, like in a moment of stress or a moment where emotions are high and tensions are high, to take that step back and kind of dissociate from it and then interject a character that you played.
Yeah. I mean, it's also important to realize that ghosts sit around the campfire and talk about Chuck Norris. So,
Right.
old joke. Sorry. So after it talks about rebuilding, it goes into growth, and they talk about two participants who reported that the narratives fit conceptually within the growth stage of the psychological model of recovery. The participants demonstrated self-management of their mental well-being and a positive sense of self. So that's that agency, um, and was not defined by past emotional difficulties. So these two of these individuals are at a level where they are able to process what's going on and reflect upon it, which I thought was uh, pretty interesting. That in their own analysis, that they were able to identify multiple people at various stages, and it's kind of interesting to see them build up to this. Psychward is saying someday it would be interesting to read an article that goes over how some people actually go through a mourning process with people relating so much with their characters. Yes, there's definitely a
Hmm.
lot of possibility of that happening, especially when people grow attached to a character, and then there's a lot of, you know, resonation with the other party members when that happens. And I remember reading an interesting little article about that specifically, where if something like that happens, it can actually devastate the party to a point that they don't want to keep playing. And um, one thing that they suggest is to allow them an opportunity to mourn,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
even like have an in-game vigil for that character. So I was like, it's like I've this was early on in my DMing, so I didn't really think about it then. But then when I read that, I was like, oh man, I didn't even realize that that was a possibility. But it's one of those kind of things that they don't talk about so much. Everyone's all about, the adventure and the fighting and everything, but no one really talks about like what happens when a party member dies.
Well, and you can even take it a step further too. Like I had mentioned in chat, is that if nobody's ever done an epilogue session for when a campaign finishes, it can be pretty eye-opening.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we had two players in my last game. When we ended it, we ran an epilogue session. We had two players talk outside the game, um, and give their okays, and their characters got married and
Yeah.
like had a happily ever after. So like they got to neatly kind of tie up their storyline and sail off into the sunset. Um, but I've also done the vigil in game. We had a one of my players decided he was done playing this particular character and he wanted to try something new, so we killed him off in a glorious fashion. And then we spent like a session and a half of like, what does this mean for the group? And like he left a will behind of what of his belongings were left and who did they go to, and like he crowned one of the other players king because he was a part of a Dwarven clan, and like he had to go through this whole process where they were still like in mourning but like forced to go through this kind of like almost like Dwarven ritual of like, are you worthy? So it was like they were still struggling with the character being gone, and now there's this pressure of like, crap, I got to live up to his expectations and all this other stuff that he left behind. It's it really can really get into people's heads.
Yes, it can. Psychward is saying that with the new Bastion system in D&D anyhow, it would be cool to tie in your character retiring after years of adventuring.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it would be kind of cool to see that, like a, generational lineage. It just kind of branches off. You marry, have kids, and then like you take on the role of your child down the road, and they start their adventuring party,
Takes up the reins after mom and dad.
right?
That could be actually pretty interesting.
that that'd be kind of fun to like have an heirloom, something
Yeah.
that's passed down from father to child. Your new character gets to visit a store in the same city decades later or centuries later and meet their kids. I so I did that to somebody because he wanted to change characters halfway through, and rather than have him just have the old character disappear and then the new character show up, I did this thing where he left his old character left in the middle of the night and left a note, and I let him write the note to the party. So he wrote the note and basically said his goodbyes, and the old character was gone, so they got to read the note, and it was interesting to see the processing on the people who were reading the note. Like there was definitely a lot of analytical, like what is he trying to tell us, or what secrets is he trying to share, and then there was also the why did he leave? Like you could see it in the way that they were thinking. It's like they
Almost like a
was
disappointment.
yeah. Um, and then simultaneously, we worked on his new character's background, and he wanted to play a druid, and he wanted to be a sea blessed. I can't remember the exact one, but it was a sea blessed druid, so he could transform into sea creatures instead of like forest animals. So um, his backstory was kind of dark because he was a mixed warlock druid, so I had to mess with that aspect. But essentially, he got tricked into a jar, and then he was trapped in the jar, and he stayed like that. He stayed in that jar for 60 years because he had something that was keeping him alive. Because the person who taught him the warlock side of his class was a visionary, so she could see everything that was going to happen and knew at some point he would get in the jar. So she gave him the necklace as a parting gift and didn't tell him anything else. So when the party found this chest, he was in it in the jar as an octopus, and they found it, and there was just an eyeball on the side of the jar, and one of the players dropped it out of surprise, and it broke open. It was an octopus, and then he transformed back into his human form. Um, and for
That's pretty cool.
so for a few sessions, nobody knew how old he actually was, um, which was kind of funny. But one thing that happened because what the necklace did, it was essentially kept him from dying, but he suffocated in the jar those entire 60 years.
Oh, God.
Oh,
So
that's a rough go.
yeah. So when he came out, he played it off perfectly. Like I said, it was definitely dark. I'm not doing to discredit that at all.
Mm.
Um, but he kind of did it to himself and like the things he wrote in his backstory. So I was like, well, this is going to be interesting. But one of the interesting aspects to the point, and I'm sorry it's taken so long to get to it, his family was still technically alive, but like everyone in his family that knew him was gone. So like his mom, his mom and his dad, his siblings, they were all already passed. But his lineage still lived on, and his name was still carried on. And when he went back to his hometown, and like when they were going through, and I presented that his family was still there, like they were still going, it it actually devastated him to on on a personal level, because he didn't know how to process that was happening, because he was already at that point in investing in the character, and then he realized that he still had family, but he never met them, or they never met him. So there was that disconnect between
Yeah.
family. So yeah, kind of dark. I apologize, but not really. It was a situation that came up.
It's okay to not feel good about a situation.
Yes. All right.
Man.
I don't want to skip this without giving you all the opportunity to talk about the growth phase with our two participants. Anything? Nope. Okay.
I'm gonna give that shrug as well.
Sure. Yeah. So once they go over that, they start going into the discussion, and I really don't want to read through all this and bore people. Um, I didn't have anything particular that kind of stuck out to me, because the reason why I say that is because a lot of what they discuss, we kind of really went into it last week, and there's a lot of crossover.
Yes.
But if y'all have any part of this you would like to bring up, I'm happy to give the floor over to you.
Corey?
I guess the one thing, wow, was it written on my face that bad?
No.
Page 264. Right hand column. I don't know, 10 sentences in, 10 lines in. However, half of the patients also reported the experience of playing D&D online. The experience of online gaming differs significantly from face-to-face gaming, with online gamers presenting with greater social isolation. Wow, isolate. You guys know what I'm trying to say.
Social isolation.
Thank you. Increased maladaptive cognition and increased addictive behavior. So, we all know we're here for tables. Currently, right now, the only game I'm playing is online, and man, I miss face to face. It's I don't know how else to put it, but I do know. Like, I guess I wanted to the increased addictive behaviors. That's just I can see that. Look at how many things are readily available, and I don't know if I had just read a news article on it, but when I saw this, I immediately went to the online gambling stuff in the back of my head. It's like, yeah, you're going to sit in an online game and you're not going to be face to face, and there's four other screens, or you go open a couple emails when you're done. I guess it's something. Do we as a community need to check on that with our peers?
I would also say, kind of a counterpoint to that, is when we had those 4 or 5 years where people weren't allowed to do things, the online portion, which is, again, like, that's what I ran for the last 10 some years.
Mm-hmm.
You can absolutely get similar effects from it, but it requires a much higher level of work from everybody and investment from everybody than just showing up in person. Like, say your session's on a Friday, like having a Friday night game session. There's a lot more effort involved, but you can still build that community. You can still build those relations, those social networks It's just significantly harder.
Yeah, like to that point, like, I definitely have seen that. I personally don't like online games. I've tried them um, multiple times, and I just never had a good experience with them. The one good experience I did have was unfortunately a game that the person who was running it was not thrilled about um, how we were playing the game. Um, and this story is very very brief, but I tried to play a rogue in that one, and then another player was playing a bard. We only played one session, and the GM was like, "No, I'm not playing with you guys. You guys are like way too like crazy for me." Um, but in that one session, me and the person who was playing the bard really clicked, and like after the session was over, we stayed up for like 3 hours and we're just sharing like the Road to El Dorado memes because he was playing a bard and I was playing a rogue. So we were like, we're we're the characters from the Road to El Dorado.
Literally trauma bonding in session 0.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and psych, kind of like to what you were saying, right? With it being a little more difficult to read body language.
Yes.
Again, it takes a little bit more effort, right? Like with webcams and kind of what we're doing now, you can get some of that even online because of how much technology has progressed. We now have, internet's everywhere. Online gaming is everywhere. Microphones, webcams, like you can do it. It's still like what you're saying. It is still not a one-to-one transfer of what it would be like table versus online.
Yeah, I can see both sides of this argument.
Yeah.
Yep. But body language isn't just here. It's
Correct.
hands, like your stomach and your waist and even your legs. Like you notice all these different like little things that people do, and it can definitely put it can be hard to see that through the camera if all you're seeing is the top quarter of a person.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I feel like, at least for this, I feel like that they maybe, I don't know how deep they went with the online portion and if they ever truly saw any of that. I wonder if it was kind of just a quick look at it and it was it's not the same, which we all agree, not identical.
In this particular study, I don't think they did.
Yeah.
Not anything more than a brief glance.
Well, and like I said towards the beginning, like when they said, they did some face-to-face interviews and then they did some Zoom interviews. It would have been nice if they had separated the two, so that way
Right.
they can see they can show differences, like maybe even some quantitative differences in the information they get. See, I used the word there, Chris. You know what I mean.
I would have liked to have seen, like you said, data split up and categorized, like you said, what was noticed by, in person versus what was online, and some of the, again, kind of the similarities and what we've mentioned, pros and cons of them.
They have smell-o-vision for D&D now. Am I reading that correctly? Psych ward. Psych ward says some of the cool benefits is the hidden rooms and more realistic, your non-dark vision, view of the dungeon, and so forth. Yeah.
I don't want to smell what the mimic smells like. I'm good.
I don't need to smell a troll.
No.
I'm good.
I mean,
you would find that
they had it in
product.
Disney
Yeah.
in the 90s, so yeah.
Yeah, and it didn't do well. That's why they took it out.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
This guy's over here going to Imagineer schooling on the side and building animatronics and smell machines. Great.
Don't
Hope
give
you're
him
ready.
ideas.
I kind of want to stay a little longer in March now if there's smell-o-vision involved.
I don't know, man. You get that wrong troll cartridge, you might be in trouble.
Right? That one spent a couple weeks out in the sulfur marsh. Okay. Yeah. Very interesting article to read. Five Nights at Freddy's D&D edition. Oh dear lord. Yeah, it was definitely an interesting article to read, and like we've said before, we're not experts in this field. We're just a trio of random yahoos trying to raise awareness and just kind of give our views and our thoughts on this particular article that we read. You can see where you were in the article that they referenced Sarah Bowman if you zoom in. All right, let's zoom in on Sarah Bowman's. Yeah, I see it right there. So right here. So she talks about right here, the reflective concept of negative bleed. Boundaries between self-character become blurred. And that's Bowman right there. Although not present in the current study, previous research has highlighted potentially harmful effects of role-playing, such as exposure to psychologically sensitive content and distress from the actions of other players. So, yes, the book that Psych Ward is talking about is called The Functions of Role-Playing Games, and the author is Sarah Bowman. It is the next book on my to-do list to read once I finish Tribe by Stephen Younger, or Sebastian Younger. Apologies. So that the functions of role playing by Sarah Bowman goes into like character development and the character creation process and the different stages that the player goes through in the resonation that they have with their character and things along those lines. I haven't started reading that one yet. These are just little tidbits that I am remembering from what Chris talks about. But yes, thank you. There they are. They cover Genesis, the development stage, elaboration stage, and maturation and complexity stage. So yeah, Genesis stage, not the Book of Genesis. Let's not confuse the two. But yeah. Final thoughts, Corey?
I liked how they actually had interviewees and the input. It's not just, oh, we went and found this.
It's not just raw data.
Yeah, it adds a highly personal touch to it.
Which makes studies like this feel and appear more effective than they are just on paper alone when you have testimonies like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree. I found those sections very it gave the article some meat.
Yes.
Something for me to really kind of sink into and examine and look at.
Yeah. My big final thought here, and we did talk about this, is a lot of the self-reflection. Reading through this and kind of putting myself in that environment and thinking about the way that it's helped me and answering those three questions. That was a big moment of self-reflection, just seeing those three questions and then thinking about those like those answers and really like recalling them. I know it brought up some issues for Max, but
So since we've gone over that, have you guys done an additional comparison? Have you guys looked back? Have you acknowledged progression? Have you seen it?
I would say
I didn't
have.
go that far, but yes, I see where you're going, but I've actually analyzed 2 or 3 other scenarios in my head.
Well, even just like, because we talked about like how this article's highlighted different people and kind of how their journeys have been different, right? They've either come in at a different stage or progressed to a different point at a different time, right? Having kind of answered those three questions, and especially number 3, right? Like where we've gone through and talked about how it's kind of affected us. Like I was even just from talking about it earlier, I've gone kind of like mentally thought about like, here's where I was when this stuff happened. Here's kind of where I progressed afterwards. And then kind of analyzing even the last like 10 years, how far I've progressed, or even the 5 years, how far I've progressed.
Yeah.
So kind of going back and thinking about it, it's actually, as crappy as it has been, it also highlights the good stuff that we've done, the correct measures to move forward, the correct measures to kind of adapt and overcome. It's kind of looking back on the negatives, kind of reinforced and highlighted those.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done a little of that myself. Yeah, I'm sure you're chomping at the bit for that quantitative study, Chris.
Should make him a guest speaker when we do it, so he has to participate too.
Oh, he will love it, and I welcome it.
We should give him a bunch of homework before we do it too.
He's
Wow,
probably already
one
read
time,
it all.
guys.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting read. It will be a reread, yeah. And
Yes.
even after reading this, I'll probably go back and reread it again, and there'll definitely be more self-reflection.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I will read the brief conclusion that they have at the top. The current study expands on research that conceptualizes recovery as a multidimensional process and highlights new elements that have implications for consumers and theoretical frameworks. So basically, the study's ongoing. And to be fair, this was like I said, it was accepted in December 21st of 2020. The article is Defeating Dragons and Demons: Consumers' Perspectives on Mental Health Recovery in Role-Playing Games by Francesco Cazzo and Ellie Quinlan. If you want, you can find this article on our website, and along with many others. Feel free to explore as you want. And if you would like to talk further, we also have a Discord, so you can join us in the Discord. And we will be, we're pretty active over there. Me, Chris, Corey, Max, a bunch of other people in our community are being very active, and it's amazing. One other thing that I want to announce is that starting tonight, I'm going to turn on a separate channel in the Discord called Podcast Announcements. Anything related to the podcast, I will announce in there, and everyone will have a visual. And then I will also have a podcast interaction channel. If you want to ask us a question, based off of something we've read, something we've experienced, or ask us, what we're planning on our next character being or anything like that. We will happily answer the question and just keep it appropriate, please. And if you want to share a story of something you've personally experienced, you are welcome to do that too. And if you don't want to provide your name, there is a anonymous bot, and the instructions on how to make that post anonymous will be in that channel, so you can make it anonymous, and then no one will know it's you. Ooh.
And
So go ahead, Max.
sharing stories like that, you will never know who it will reach out and touch and help. Just having that sense of camaraderie of knowing that someone's been through something similar enough, that you can kind of get insight, or even just knowing that you're not the only person out there for going through whatever you're going through. It helps.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, we will make a thing out of it on the podcast, and we can read them live and answer them live. And if you have a story to share, we can share it live too, because that's what this is all about, raising awareness. And so if you have a story to share, I will share it. And if you don't want your name, there's a way to make it anonymous. So with that, next week we're gonna turn things away from talking about subjects, and we're gonna focus on DM coaching / tips, tricks, tools, and we're also going to share a tabletop role-playing game and briefly go over what it is, what it's about, its system, and we might even make a character, so that way we're ready for the one-shot we're going to do the week after with that system. So please join us next time. And
Have we decided what it is going to be?
yes, we have.
Okay, cool. If we don't, we'll do the rest of it later. I just want to make sure we had something.
Yes, and Chris is going to run it, so he's going to run it for us.
Yay! I mean,
no. It'll be good.
That's what I think it is. It's going to be good times.
Oh, I'm not worried about that part. I know it will be. I'm worried about what comes with it.
He's evil mustache twirling right now, so.
Yeah, I used to curl this. We can do that. We can go back to curls.
Hey, game recognizes game. I've been called chaotic evil more than once.
With that said, I want to thank everyone for joining us. You have a great evening, and we will see you next week.
Have a good one.
Have a good one, everybody.